All right, let me tell you a story. It's late December, and there's a woman standing in the toy aisle at Target. It's a war zone. Half the shelves are empty. There are panicked parents. It's almost come to fisticuffs over toys. And the woman next to you is clutching a stuffed dinosaur and muttering to herself, but he said he wanted a Transformer Dinobot. This is not a Transformer Dinobot. She looks like she's trying to calculate whether breaking a promise to her 6-year-old will cost more in emotional damage than buying this stuffed animal substitute. This exact scenario is described by the psychologist Robert Cialdini in his book, The Psychology of Influence. Toy companies advertise must-have toys leading into the holiday season. Kids beg for those toys. Parents, trying to be good and present and loving for their kids, promise that they'll get those toys. What was it last year? What were the toys? Does anybody have toys that were like the toy that their grandchild wanted? Anyway, when
I think it was a Furby.
Furby? You've read the original story, right, in Cialdini? So, originally in the version that is in the book, it's a Furby. Furbies were much hyped. You remember Furbies? Those things, they would talk and they wouldn't shut up? Yeah. So, the companies would underproduce, they would advertise and then underproduce the Furbies. And when you got to the store, mysteriously they'd all be gone. There wouldn't be enough stock. So you'd have to buy something else. Because you had Hanukkah, or Christmas, or Kwanzaa, or Diwali if it was at that time of year. And then magically in January, the market was flooded with Furbies or Transformer Dinobots. And you'd already made this commitment to your kid and you brought them the wrong toy. So you had to go back to the store and buy a second toy. There's a slide back there you can see an illustration of what I'm talking about. So in the end, you would have to, because you were bound by your word, you had to buy not one, but 2 toys. You were out the cost of 2 toys. Cialdini in his book, he calls this commitment consistency. And it's not just about toys. Once you make a promise, once you say something out loud, we as human beings want to appear consistent even if circumstances change. This may seem like a harmless parenting anecdote about having to buy additional toys, but it's also present in our Parsha this week, Mattot, because the Torah knew long ago about this human tendency to be follow through on your word, long before marketing companies knew about it. Parshat Mattot opens not with narrative but with this law. If you make a vow, a neder, to God, or you swear an oath to bind yourself in some way, you can't break your oath. You have to do everything that you commit to do out loud. You shall not, literally, you shall not profane your word. You shall not go back on your promise. Or the Furby, or whatever it was, to go to the gym more often, whatever your commitment was. And Maimonides, that great Jewish scold, that dour, some of you are familiar with Maimonides, he's very, how do you say that nicely? Maimonides is very disappointed in you all the time for not living up to his expectations. Anyway, he lived about 1,000 years ago, give or take. And he says it's better not to make a promise at all than make a promise that you can't fulfill. In his famous law code, the Mishneh Torah, in the section entitled Vows, he goes through all these different topics. This is a powerful teaching. Judaism says that speech is not cheap. God creates the universe with words. And when we vow, we have to be very careful what we promise, because once we say something, it sets expectations in the world around us. We have built into our system, coming up on the high holidays, we have the Kol Nidre prayer, a prayer that says that it kind of wipes out vows for the coming year. It says, like, all these vows that we might vow, please God forgive us, and friends forgive us if we can't always live up to our word, because as humans we're fallible and sometimes we can't live up to our word. However, and here's where I think it's going to get into the grown-up part of our discussion, when you make a vow or you make a public statement, you can be manipulated. And this can be dangerous and painful. And the Torah, in telling us to be careful about vowing, it walks this fine line. Our tradition says you have to follow through on your word, but you shouldn't be enslaved by your word. Oh, next slide, please. And, yeah, the Facebook slide. So we shouldn't just feel that we shouldn't be bound and manipulated by our words in the toy aisle in December at Target, but also when we write on a Facebook wall or in a listserv or make a comment on someone's Instagram. For those of you who cannot see the slide says, Mark says, and it's a Facebook wall, sorry, but you're completely wrong. And underneath, Linda replies, oh yeah, says the Hitler. We've all been there, right? What's called the Godwin point. The Godwin point is a sort of calculation that the longer you go down a Facebook wall, the more likely you reach moral absolutes and someone calls someone else Hitler. It's a known phenomenon on Facebook listservs, on internet, on chat online. And so we live in a world where we're constantly encouraged to make all these commitments, not even orally, but in writing online. We don't say, I swear. Instead, we shoot off our mouth about politics in public forums. We make all these statements in comment sections. Let me turn that off so you don't get feedback. We make all these status updates. I saw this thing in the New York Times, or I saw this thing in the Washington Post, or we repost stuff. And by reposting stuff, we are validating that point of view, and then someone comes and attacks us and says, hey, you didn't see this article that I saw in this other publication that I read. Fox News, whatever it is that the contrary point of view is. And then it gets more heated, and more heated, and more heated, and more heated. Jonathan Haidt writes in The Righteous Mind that we are often driven to make these statements emotionally, these heavily charged statements on Facebook or whatever media you want to use, and then we have to rationalize them logically later. Once we choose a side in an argument, we have to defend it. Because we don't want to seem weak, to go back on our word, to seem inconsistent. Social media is an echo chamber. And so not only do we express our views, but we get nudged deeper and deeper into our viewpoints, into our silo, until we can no longer hear the other side of the argument. And when we post and repost and become more and more emotionally aggressive in the comment section, we're rewarded with little thumbs up likes that are designed to give us little dopamine hits. When our friends go onto our wall and say, yeah, stick it to them, yeah, yeah, and we get dragged further and further into these extreme positions. There's a sociologist named Tufekci who studies digital movements, and he notes that social media platforms don't amplify truth. They amplify intensity. The angrier the post, the more engagement that post gets. The more likes, the more hates. There's no thumbs down, but the more Hitler comments in the notes on the wall. And when you've posted something intense, something defiant or divisive, are you going to walk it back the next day when somebody calls you out on your wall? Are you going to say, how many of you have seen often on a Facebook wall, hey, you're right, I was totally wrong about that? Or the comment section on an article on the New York Times or on Fox or on whatever your media of choice. It doesn't happen. It's not because we don't want to be honest. It's because we're creatures who believe in consistency, the consistency of our word. Whether that word is spoken, whether it's typed, we feel this pull to remain consistent all the time, and that's what makes us so easy to manipulate. Toy companies profit when we feel bound by these promises from the Cialdini story at the beginning. But politicians profit when voters feel bound to their side of the argument. It's a tough time. Social media companies, worst of all, profit when our emotional commitments trap us in cycles of polarization that keep us engaged on our Facebook wall. When we make these public declarations without room for reconsideration, we shut ourselves off to growth. And when our speech becomes performance instead of actual dialogue, it's not just our politics that suffer, but it's our mental well-being that suffers and our soul that suffers. We have to find a balance. We have to honor the sacredness of our speech, the importance of the promises that we make. But we also have to take into account that humans are creatures that change their minds, that are capable of being wrong. Even we can be wrong. I hear some laughs. It's important for us to remember that we have built into our Jewish tradition a formal release of vows, so that we remember, it happens at Yom Kippur, so that we remember throughout the year that even if we make a strong statement, that we should be open to changing our mind. Our country is at a moment of greater polarization than has been seen at least in my living memory. And this is how we got into this situation. So I say to you, be mindful of what you post. Be careful of what you comment and what you proclaim online, what you put in writing online. And know that your personal highest level of consistency in yourself should not be to throw away comments on a Facebook wall or a listserv or in the comment section of an article. Your highest consistency, your commitment to consistency should be to the consistency of your compassion for others and for yourself when it's time to change your mind. Shabbat Shalom.